but you guys are on a ghost tour in Salem, Massachusetts, and you want to hear about malevolent energies, yes? We have a lot of them, and I will deliver. The tour is going to get progressively more intense. Here, it really takes a turn. We're going to start getting into Salem's more notorious and vicious, frankly, poltergeists. Here we go. I got some backlight because I love me the drama. And let's form our very first friendship semicircle of the evening, shall we? So why am I qualified to do this? I am an enthusiast. I am a super nerd. I am an armchair historian who has been studying demonology and occult history since I could pretty much study anything, to the absolute delight of my Southern Baptist parents, as you can imagine. Surprisingly, the spirits that are lingering here, where all of the action took place back in the day, they are by and large puritanical spirits that are very restless indeed, with unfinished business left over from 1692. So I'm going to be sort of giving you Witch Trials 101 tonight, essentially, in a roundabout way. But I'd wager that a lot of you have already done the museum thing today and have heard these stories ad nauseum. So museum goers, how many of you do I have? Oh boy, yes. And here we are at Charter Street Cemetery, or Old Bearing Point, predictably one of my very favorite places in town, and talk about some puritanical corpses that you are no doubt very, very curious about indeed. If I do not answer this question right away, inevitably it gets asked, so here it is. Where are the bodies of the quote-unquote witches? Those bodies would never have been interred in a formal site like this one. They remain undisturbed out about a mile out of town at the site of the old burial ground. I promise, or excuse me, the old hanging ground. Shame on me. I promise we're going to get into that location when it comes up in detail. But when someone was executed during the trials, by hanging of course, their corpse was removed from the noose and tossed down into a pit, a mass grave, that had been dug next to that very infamous hanging tree. And the bodies piled up there over the course of the year. They were deliberately disrespected. What we're standing in today, right now, is the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. And there are no bodies here, as I said, but if you notice, there are 20 benches encircling the perimeter, and each one, as we pass by as we leave, you'll notice has a name, a method of execution, and a death date on it. So these serve as pseudo gravestones for those lost to the trials. There is one for every single person formally executed during the hysteria.
Was it 20 people executed?
20 people formally executed, but others died in jail, etc. It was very, very unfortunate. However, there were no witches harmed in the making of the Salem witch trials. What do I mean by that? It's safe to say there was not a single practitioner of dark magic here in the late 1600s amongst the community. So what on earth was going on here? If we are talking religious tyrants on a judicial bench, we have got to talk about the superstar of the Salem witch trials that is buried here. His stone is very easy to find. It is arguably the largest rectangular stone, right there in that neat little line, in the entire cemetery. So tomorrow, during the day, you can go and visit Charter Street Cemetery when it's open again and go pay your respects or spit. I am not in charge of what you do, but there lies Judge Jonathan Hathorne. Crucible fans, that name will be very familiar to you. He was nicknamed the Hanging Judge. Who is haunting Charter Street Cemetery? $1 million question, because of course it looks absolutely ripe for a haunting. And some of my colleagues will spin a truly harrowing tale about a lady in white that manifests in the back corner amongst those trees to go wandering, weeping through the shadows nightly. Juicy. Yes, but I say any cemetery worth its salt had better have a lady in white lurking in a dark corner somewhere, and I would not hazard a guess as to who she is, if she's even here at Charter Street Cemetery at all. Full disclosure, the reports we get of paranormal activity here at Charter Street Cemetery, it is wildly inconsistent, and in my opinion, it's largely gossip and hearsay, and I like to structure my tour so we talk about ghosts that I can totally confirm for you that have repeated sightings and consistent activity in the downtown area, definitive unfinished business, that sort of thing. So is Charter Street Cemetery haunted? maybe. I think people just really want it to be because it is so nice and ooky spooky. But let's get right into it. Who is Giles and what is pressing? Giles was 82 during the trials, and he was the classic, if not the original, hey, get off my lawn, you kids guy. And this is a puritanical get off my lawn, you kids guy, so it's a completely different animal. What do I mean by that? Well, in his 60s, just to give you a flavor of what he was like, Giles Corey had been taken to court and found guilty for beating one of his servants to death with a stick. So this aggressive elderly gentleman is the one who goes toe-to-toe with our sinister young sheriff. So, oh my god, what a rumble matchup of unpleasantness, yes. How did Giles get wrapped up in all of this mess? Well, he was exceptionally clever, and he noticed something was amiss. As the trials wore on, the witches were suspiciously getting richer and richer and richer. The accusations were rapidly climbing the social ladder. What was going on with the money? There's always something going on with the money. Yes, Giles was watching this very intently. What happened to your fortune after you were formally tried and executed for witchcraft? Well, you lost the privilege of giving any money to your descendants. No one could inherit it. Instead, your assets were seized by the government. That means your money fell right into the hot little hand or claw of our boy, Sheriff George Corwin. And he was, of course, people start accusing richer and richer folks trying to get bigger and bigger pieces of the pie that the sheriff is all too happy to be serving. This turns into an exceptionally lucrative business for Sheriff George Corwin. He doesn't want to see the trial stop or be delayed by any means, but it is Giles Corey that eventually throws a wrench in the gears of the sheriff's well-oiled machine when he does something really strategic. He was determined to ensure that the money that he had worked so hard to earn fell to his children and that the sheriff kept his grubby paws off of it. So he developed a plan that might ensure that that would go through even if everything went as south as possible. He put the plan into action when inevitably one evening the sheriff showed up on his doorstep, informed him that he had been accused of witchcraft. In the face of this, Giles Corey did something brilliant. He didn't say anything. If you didn't say you were innocent or guilty, that you did or did not do witchcraft, you fell into a limbo. You couldn't have a formal trial, you couldn't be formally executed, the sheriff couldn't formally take your money. So this is the plan. The plan is really gruesome. Corey intends to die by torture in the dungeons, but he intends to die holding his silence. If he dies without having said he did or did not do witchcraft, they can't even cobble together a trial, he wins. So the plan is going well, because the sheriff is the sheriff. Corwin took Corey down into the dungeons and resolved for 2 days to break this old man. Because Corwin was determined to make this work for him. Even if he couldn't get Corey's money, he wanted to spin it to his advantage. So he got creative and resurrected a form of torture that had only been seen in Europe previously. This is the first time that pressing occurred in America. With this gesture, Corwin wanted to make something very clear to the town, which was essentially, yeah, you guys can leap through the loophole that Giles Corey found, withhold your pleas, delay this process that's making me a lot of money if you want, but if you do, this will happen to you as well. In front of everyone, Corwin stripped Corey naked, and they laid the old man down on his back in a shallow ditch, again dug just there, and on top of him, they set a wooden door, and on top of that door, right over Corey's chest, they lowered a 50-pound rock, for starters. It's under these conditions, in front of the crowd, that the sheriff asked Corey the question he had been asking over and over and over again in the dungeons, receiving no response there, which was, of course, are you innocent or guilty of the crime of witchcraft? To which Corey finally and famously responded, but with just a brief challenge. And I quote, "More weight." And if that's not the most metal thing you could possibly do in puritanical New England, but that was his answer every single time he was asked that question. And so his death can be, in a way, considered a protest death, but oh my God, did he ever die? However, it wasn't until 2 really rough days had passed, and they had stacked, brace yourselves, 1,600 pounds on top of him, which eventually crushed him to death. That is the size of a decent-sized horse, if you needed to imagine that. But this is where it gets stranger. And it's Salem, so of course it's going to get stranger. Pervasive lore says that Giles offered us something else aside from more weight over the course of his torture. Allegedly, he also delivered at some point a very hearty, "I curse you, sheriff, and all of Salem." If you're going to go out with a bang, respect. But that was definitely a curse. Giles, however, as you know, was not a witch. Weirdly, the curse worked, and history backs this up. Let's see. The position of High Sheriff of Essex County, the one that Corwin occupied, has been cursed here in Salem, likewise. So, what happened to our dearest, darlingest baby sheriff? You guys will be very pleased to know that 3 years after the trials, after the pressing, Sheriff Corwin died. That is not extraordinary to me, though, nor is it extraordinary that he died of a very specific blood disease and heart condition that eventually led to his heart failure. What is extraordinary, though, is that ever since then, anybody who has taken the position thereafter, they have died early and of the exact same blood disease and heart condition that has led to their heart failure. So Yale thought that was pretty creepy too, and I guess they had a lot of time on their hands in the 70s because they did a full study. So this is on Google, it's on the internet, we know anything on the internet is true. So they found the curse is totally consistent up until the mid-1800s when police reform happened and the power of the sheriff changed. It was delegated for the first time. The curse wasn't broken, it just started to travel. If it didn't hit the sheriff, it would take out a lieutenant or deputy on the force. Let's fast forward to the 20th century because there was more police reform, right? The curse is traveling a little more erratically, though certainly still too close for comfort. If it didn't take out the sheriff or lieutenant or deputy, it would target a member of the family of whoever owned Sheriff George Corwin's old property. We finally broke the curse in like 1991 when, arbitrarily on a whim, we decided to move the sheriff's office out of Salem proper. Curse tabled, half of it, because Giles distinctly cursed the sheriff, and then why not all of Salem in general. And there is no moving Salem out of Salem anytime soon, so it seems that we here in town are going to be dealing with the repercussions of this curse forever and ever, amen. And this brings us finally to Salem's most notorious poltergeist. Giles Corey's spirit is arguably our most famous haunting. His spirit is inarguably our most vicious haunting. This is a ruthless, lingering spirit, and he often manifests in Howard Street Cemetery, where his body was unceremoniously discarded after his torture. But unfortunately for us, he doesn't stay there. This ghost gets around. He has been seen about a mile out from this location in all directions. And when he appears like Bridget Bishop does, like flesh and blood, an 80-year-old gentleman in perfect puritanical attire, nothing ghostly about him, but he's looking absolutely furious. His most famous sighting was here in Howard Street Cemetery, though. He was very, very active the evening before the Great Fire of 1914, which I said was going to come up again because it has some harrowing and bizarre haunted history to it. So bizarre and so harrowing that actually locals refer to it sometimes as the Witch's Revenge. There were a lot of very unfortunate paranormal coinkydinks surrounding this catastrophe. I'm going to keep it to the two that I find personally most compelling. We have got to talk about where the fire broke out. It broke out a mile out of town on Proctor's Ledge, the site of the old hanging ground. And that would have been weird enough for me to want to talk about it with you, but it didn't just break out anywhere at that site. It broke out in a really uncomfortably specific spot. It was a brush fire, not arson, that caught in the dry grass that was growing directly out of the mass grave of witch trials victims. So if you're wondering where the hanging tree is, if you can visit it, I am so sorry, it burst into flames at the start of the Great Fire of 1914. The fire sprang up from there, raced here into downtown, taking out the courthouse, the jail, Bridget Bishop's property, all these super historic, super wooden structures. And this is the second strange thing. We were just about to cash in on tourism. And this first part really breaks my historian heart. We were tastefully about to open the courthouse for the public for the first time ever. We were a month away from doing that. However, there was another building that I just mentioned briefly that had been open to the public for quite some time. It was the old jail. And that had been purchased by an enterprising gentleman and his wife who saw fit to convert it into, get ready, a historic bed and breakfast where you could sleep where the witches were tortured. So that's not a good look. And there was a lot of damage, property damage, as I've said. As you can imagine, there's tons of injuries. Curiously, there were just 3 fatalities. That gentleman, his wife, and their young child were all heard shrieking from inside their newly renovated bed and breakfast jail, and they were the only 3 to be burned alive during the Great Fire of 1914. So hence the Witch's Revenge, and Giles Corey's ghost seems to have heralded this. His appearance has always been an ill omen here in Salem. Since his first appearances in the late 1700s, whenever he pops up, something horrific is about to happen in town. So all I ask is, on your adventures here in Salem, if you happen upon the grumpiest puritanical grandpa ever, please just go back to where you bought your tickets, let my boss know so he can let me know, and I can skitter out of town with the rest of you, because I do not want to be here for whatever happens next. But it is here that we leave.
And there you go, our evening with Salem Night Tours. I am here with our fun, energetic, and lovely guide, Cass. Cass, great meeting you. I love the tour, one of the best I've taken, and people at home I kind of know I go on all of them. What can you tell us about your tour company?
Our company, we run year-round, so you'll always find us here at 8 o'clock during the on-season and 6 o'clock in the evenings on the off-season. We're here at 127 Essex Street. Come find us or visit us online at salemghosttours.com.
And for Harry Potter fans, their store is Hardcore Harry Potter. Okay, don't judge me, but I actually haven't seen the movies. Yeah,
You're a muggle.
Yeah, I know. I get everybody calling me that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the tour. I had a blast.
Thank you for coming.
If you enjoyed this video, please comment, hit like below, share it with a friend. Check out Salem Night Tours. Ask for Cass. She's awesome. Thank you again. Welcome to the journey.